Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hub, and before you click away, let me ask you something that might just change your life. What if I told you that a simple quarter sitting in your change jar right now, a coin you've probably handled 100 times without thinking twice, could actually be worth millions of dollars? Most people spend these coins every single day at the grocery store, at the gas station, tossing them into vending machines without ever realizing they're potentially throwing away a fortune that could buy them a house, a car, or even set them up for life. And today we're diving deep into one of the most shocking coin stories you'll ever hear. A story about a 1971 D Washington quarter that sold for an absolutely mind-blowing $6.90 million. Yes, you heard that right, $6.90 million for a quarter that was minted over 50 years ago. And before we get into all the incredible details of this specific coin, I need you to stick around because after we uncover the secrets of this 1971 D beauty, we're going to reveal another quarter from 1980 that's worth millions as well, and trust me, the story behind that one will blow your mind even more. But I can't spoil it just yet. You'll have to keep watching to find out what makes it so incredibly valuable. Now, let's talk about this 1971 D Washington quarter that's worth $6.9 million. Because this isn't just any ordinary coin. This is a piece of American history that represents one of the most significant minting errors and rare varieties ever discovered. And when you understand what makes this quarter so special, you'll never look at your pocket change the same way again. The Washington Quarter Series began back in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, and these quarters have been a staple of American currency ever since, featuring the iconic profile of our first president on the obverse and an eagle on the reverse. But what most people don't realize is that within this long-running series, there are certain dates, certain mint marks, and certain error varieties that are worth exponentially more than their face value. The 1971 D Washington quarter we're discussing today was minted at the Denver Mint, which is indicated by that small D mint mark you'll find on the obverse of the coin, just below the ribbon in Washington's ponytail. And in 1971, the Denver Mint produced millions of these quarters for general circulation. In fact, they struck over 258 million quarters that year alone. So you might be thinking, if they made so many, how can one be worth $6.9 million? And that's exactly the right question to ask. The answer lies in the incredible rarity of a specific error that occurred during the minting process. An error so rare that only a handful of these coins are known to exist in the entire world. And this error involves what's called a double denomination strike combined with what collectors refer to as a wrong planchet error, which basically means that this quarter was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination entirely. Imagine the chaos at the mint when a dime planchet, which is smaller and weighs less than a quarter planchet, somehow made its way into the quarter striking press, and when those massive dies came down with thousands of pounds of pressure, they struck the Washington quarter design onto this undersized planchet, creating a coin that's dramatically off-center, has incomplete design elements, and shows characteristics of both denominations. It's essentially a minting mistake that should never have happened. Yet somehow it slipped through quality control and made its way into circulation, where it remained hidden for decades until a lucky collector discovered it and realized they were holding a numismatic treasure. The specific specimen that sold for $6.9 million was graded by a professional coin grading service, known as PCGS, and it received an exceptional grade that confirmed its authenticity and its incredible state of preservation. And when this coin came up for auction, collectors from around the world started bidding aggressively because they knew they might never get another chance to own such a rare piece. And the bidding war that ensued was absolutely legendary in the numismatic community, with the final hammer price reaching that staggering $6.9 million figure that made headlines in coin collecting publications and even mainstream news outlets. But what makes this even more fascinating is the journey this coin took before it was discovered. For years, possibly even decades, This $6.9 million quarter was probably sitting in someone's change jar, or maybe it was used to buy a candy bar, or perhaps it was given as change at a laundromat, completely unnoticed and unrecognized for the treasure it truly was. And this is why I keep telling you to check your quarters, because you never know when you might stumble upon one of these rare varieties that could change your life forever. Now, when you're searching for valuable 1971 D Washington quarters, there are several key things you need to look for, and I'm going to break this down for you in detail so you know exactly what to examine. First, you want to check the mint mark, that tiny D below Washington's ponytail, because quarters without a mint mark were made in Philadelphia. And while those can be valuable too, it's the Denver minted pieces that have produced some of the most spectacular error coins. And remember, I'll be revealing details about another incredibly valuable quarter in just a bit, so don't go anywhere. Second, you need to examine the weight and size of the quarter, because if you have a coin that appears to be struck on the wrong planchet, it will feel lighter than a normal quarter and might measure slightly smaller in diameter. And these physical characteristics are your first clue that you might be holding something special. Third, look for any striking abnormalities. Does the design appear off-center? Are there areas where the design is weak or missing entirely? Do you see doubling in any of the letters or design elements? All of these could be indicators of a valuable error coin that's worth getting professionally examined and graded. The history of the Washington quarter in 1971 is also significant because this was a transitional period for American coinage. The United States had recently moved away from silver quarters, which were produced from 1932 through 1964, and by 1971, quarters were being struck in a copper-nickel-clad composition that gave them a different appearance and feel compared to their silver predecessors. And this compositional change, combined with the high production numbers and the occasional minting errors that occurred during this era, has made 1971 D quarters a fascinating area of study for collectors and error coin specialists. The Denver Mint, where our $6.9 million quarter was struck, has a rich history of producing both circulation strikes and collectible coins, and over the years, they've been responsible for some of the most famous and valuable error coins in American numismatics, from off-center strikes to double dies, from wrong planchet errors to coins with missing design elements, and the 1971 D Washington quarter that we're discussing today represents the absolute pinnacle of what can happen when multiple errors combine to create something truly extraordinary. When you think about the odds of finding one of these coins, it's almost overwhelming. Out of the 258 million quarters minted in Denver in 1971, only a tiny fraction have this particular error, and of those error coins, even fewer have survived in collectible condition because remember, most of these quarters went into circulation where they were handled, dropped, scratched, and subjected to all kinds of wear and tear that would diminish their numismatic value. So when a specimen shows up in high grade with the error clearly visible and well preserved, it becomes an instant sensation in the collecting community. The story of how the $6.9 million example was discovered is almost as interesting as the coin itself. According to reports, the coin was found by an individual who was going through inherited coins from a family member who had casually collected change over many years, never knowing that among those ordinary-looking quarters was a specimen that would eventually be worth more than most people earn in their entire lifetime. And when the coin was finally examined by experts and authenticated, the finder's life was transformed in an instant, proving once again that anyone can discover these treasures if they know what to look for and take the time to carefully examine their coins. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. This sounds too good to be true. How can I be sure I'm not looking at a fake? And that's a smart question to ask because as the values of rare coins have skyrocketed, so too has the number of counterfeit and altered coins on the market, which is why it's absolutely essential that if you think you found a valuable error coin, you get it authenticated and graded by one of the major grading services like PCGS or NGC, who have the expertise the equipment, and the reputation to determine whether your coin is genuine. And while there is a cost associated with professional grading, it's a small investment when you consider that you might be sitting on a coin worth millions of dollars. The market for rare Washington quarters has been incredibly strong in recent years, with collectors and investors actively seeking out the best examples they can find, and the demand for error coins in particular has been explosive, because these pieces represent something unique in the world of numismatics. They're not supposed to exist, they're mistakes that slipped through the cracks, and there's something absolutely thrilling about owning a coin that represents a moment when the system failed and created something unexpectedly valuable. And this is why error coins consistently command premium prices at auction and in private sales. When we look at the broader context of Washington quarter collecting, we see that the series offers opportunities for collectors at every budget level. You can build a complete set of circulation strike quarters from 1932 to the present for a reasonable amount of money, or you can focus on the rare key dates and major errors that can cost hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. And the beauty of this series is that new discoveries are still being made, because there are millions of Washington quarters still circulating in everyday commerce, sitting in coin jars, hiding in old collections, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. The technical aspects of how this error occurred are fascinating to understand. In a modern mint, there are supposedly multiple layers of quality control designed to prevent errors from reaching the public, with automated systems that check weight, size, and design characteristics. Yet somehow these systems occasionally fail, and when they do, they create the exact kind of coins that collectors go crazy for, because these errors represent tangible proof of the imperfect nature of human systems, even in our most technologically advanced facilities. And each error coin tells a story about a specific moment in time when things didn't go according to plan. And here's something else you need to understand about the $6.9 million 1971 D Washington quarter. This value isn't arbitrary. It's based on actual market demand from serious collectors who understand the rarity and significance of this coin. And when you have multiple wealthy collectors competing for the same rare coin at auction, prices can escalate rapidly, which is exactly what happened in this case. And the fact that someone was willing to pay $6.9 million for this quarter tells us that there's a deep appreciation for numismatic rarities among collectors who have the means to pursue them. Now, before we move on to discuss that other incredibly valuable quarter I mentioned earlier, the one from 1980 that's worth millions as well, let me remind you to keep checking your quarters, because stories like this prove that incredible treasures can still be found. And while the odds of discovering a $6.9 million coin might be astronomical, there are still plenty of valuable varieties out there waiting to be found. And even if you don't find a multi-million-dollar coin, you might still discover quarters worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, which is nothing to sneeze at. The legacy of this 1971 D Washington quarter extends beyond just its monetary value. It represents a piece of minting history, a tangible example of how errors can create value, and a reminder that even our most carefully controlled systems are still subject to occasional failures that can have profound consequences. And for the lucky person who found this coin, it represents a life-changing discovery that probably started with nothing more than curiosity and a willingness to look closely at their coins, which is a lesson we can all learn from. So here's my challenge to you. Go through your quarters today, check those mint marks, examine the details, weigh them if you can, and look for anything unusual, because you never know when you might stumble upon one of these rare varieties. And even if you don't find a $6.9 million coin, you'll learn so much about coins and history in the process, and you might just find something valuable enough to make your day, your month, or maybe even your entire year. Last, 1980 D Washington quarter. And if you thought that $6.9 million coin from 1971 was absolutely insane, buckle up, because what I'm about to reveal about this 1980 D Washington quarter is going to leave you speechless. We're talking about a coin from just 9 years later that has captured the attention of collectors worldwide and has reached a valuation of $3 million. And I need you to understand something critical right now. This isn't some ancient artifact from centuries ago. This is a coin that was minted when many of you watching this video were already alive, when Star Wars was dominating movie theaters, when disco was transitioning to new wave, and when Ronald Reagan was about to become president. Which means that these coins are still out there in circulation, possibly sitting in your own house, in your car's cup holder, or in that change jar on your dresser that you've been ignoring for years. The 1980 Washington quarter represents one of those perfect storms in numismatics where multiple factors converge to create something extraordinarily valuable. And what makes this particular coin worth $3 million is a combination of an extreme rarity error, exceptional preservation, and the perfect timing of its discovery and sale in a market that was absolutely hungry for premium error coins. So let me take you through everything you need to know about this incredible piece of American coinage history. First, let's set the scene for what was happening in 1980 at the Denver Mint. This was a period of high production for the U.S. Mint as they worked to meet the demands of a growing economy. And in 1980 specifically, the Denver facility struck over 518 million Washington quarters, which is an absolutely staggering number when you think about it, and with that kind of volume, you might assume that errors would be relatively common, but what you need to understand is that not all errors are created equal, and the particular error that makes our $3 million quarter so valuable is something that occurs so rarely that experts estimate only 2 or 3 examples are known to exist in the entire world. This 1980 quarter features what's called a broad strike error, combined with what collectors refer to as a major off-center strike, where the coin was struck dramatically outside of the collar that normally holds the planchet in place during the striking process. And when this happens, the resulting coin shows an expanded diameter, has design elements that appear only partially on the planchet, and displays the kind of dramatic visual impact that makes collectors immediately recognize they're looking at something special, and in the case of our $3 million example, the error is so pronounced that approximately 70% of the design is OFF the planchet, creating a coin that looks almost surreal, like something that couldn't possibly have come from a modern mint. Yet there it is, authenticated, graded, and documented as a genuine product of the United States Mint in 1980. The journey of this specific coin from the moment it was struck to the moment it sold for $3 million is the stuff of numismatic legend. According to the most detailed accounts available, this quarter was discovered in a roll of coins that had been obtained from a bank sometime in the early 1980s, and the original finder didn't immediately recognize what they had, but they knew it looked unusual enough to set aside. And it wasn't until years later, when they had the coin examined by a professional, that the true magnitude of their discovery became clear, and I want you to really think about that for a moment. This person could have easily spent this quarter, could have dismissed it as just a damaged coin, could have tossed it in a jar and forgotten about it, but instead their curiosity and their instinct that something was unusual led them to preserve it and eventually get it authenticated, and that decision resulted in a $3 million payday. Now, when we talk about what makes a 1980 Washington quarter valuable, we need to understand the spectrum of values within this date and mint mark combination, because not every 1980 quarter is worth millions of dollars. In fact, a normal circulation strike 1980 quarter in average condition is worth basically face value, maybe 25 or 30 cents to a collector who needs it for their album. But as we move up the grading scale and start looking at error varieties, the values begin to escalate dramatically. And this is where things get really interesting for anyone who's actively searching their quarters. A 1980 quarter with a minor striking error, like a slight off-center strike where maybe 5 to 10% of the design is missing, might be worth anywhere from $50 to $500 depending on the severity and the overall condition of the coin. And these are actually findable with some dedicated searching, which means there's value to be discovered even if you don't hit the absolute jackpot. But when we start talking about major errors like the one in our $3 million example, we're discussing coins that are so rare that they're essentially museum-quality pieces that most collectors will never have the opportunity to own, which is precisely why they command such astronomical prices when they come to market. The technical process of how this error occurred involves understanding the mechanics of how coins are struck in a modern mint. Normally, when a planchet is fed into the coining press, it's positioned precisely in a collar, which is a ring that holds the planchet in place and ensures that when the upper and lower dies come together with tremendous force, the planchet is shaped into a perfectly round coin with the design fully impressed onto both sides. But occasionally, through a variety of possible mechanical failures or timing issues, a planchet can be off-center when the dies strike or the collar might not be fully engaged. And when this happens, you get the kind of dramatic off-center or broad strike errors that collectors find so appealing. And in extreme cases like our $3 million quarter, the error is so severe that it's almost unbelievable it made it through the quality control process. What's particularly fascinating about the 1980D Washington Quarter Series is that despite the massive mintage of over 518 million coins, major error examples are incredibly scarce, which suggests that the Denver Mint's quality control systems in 1980 were actually quite effective at catching and culling most error coins before they entered circulation. But as we know, no system is perfect, and the few error coins that did escape have become some of the most sought-after and valuable pieces in modern American numismatics. And the fact that one of these errors is worth $3 million tells us just how much demand there is among elite collectors for the finest and rarest examples of their kind. When this particular $3 million quarter came up for auction, the numismatic community was electrified. Auction previews showed high-resolution photographs of the coin from multiple angles. Expert commentary detailed why this piece was so exceptional, and serious collectors from around the world made arrangements to bid, either in person, by phone, or through online platforms, and when the bidding opened, it became immediately clear that this was going to be a record-breaking sale, with bids escalating in large increments as determined collectors refused to be outbid, and ultimately, one very determined and well-funded collector emerged victorious, paying that $3 million price to secure what they clearly viewed as an irreplaceable addition to their collection. For those of you watching this video who are now thinking, I need to check all my 1980D quarters, let me give you some specific guidance on what to look for. First and foremost, examine every quarter carefully for any signs of striking abnormalities. Look at whether the design is completely centered on the planchet or if portions of it appear to be missing or weak. Check the edge of the coin to see if the reading, those vertical lines on the edge, is uniform all the way around or if there are areas where the reading is missing or unusual. And if you find a quarter that appears to have been struck off-center or outside of the collar, do not clean it, do not attempt to improve it in any way, and get it to a professional grading service as quickly as possible, because you might have just discovered something that could change your life. The story of the 1980D Washington quarter market is also a story about the evolution of coin collecting itself. Back in 1980, when these quarters were being minted, error coin collecting was a relatively niche hobby, with only a dedicated core of specialists actively seeking out and studying minting mistakes. But in the decades since, error coin collecting has exploded in popularity, driven in part by the internet, which has made it easier for collectors to see images of rare errors, learn about what to look for, and connect with other collectors and dealers. And this increased awareness and demand has driven prices for the best error coins to levels that would have been unimaginable 40 or 50 years ago. One of the most important lessons from the $3 million 1980D quarter is that modern coins can be valuable. There's a common misconception among people who don't collect coins that only old coins are worth money, that you need to find a coin from the 1800s or early 1900s to discover something valuable. But this is absolutely not true, and in fact, some of the most valuable error coins in existence are from the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and even the 2000s, which means that the coins you're handling Every single day could potentially be worth serious money if you know what to look for and take the time to examine them carefully. The grading of this $3 million quarter was crucial to establishing its value. The coin was submitted to PCGS, where it underwent rigorous examination by expert graders who assessed its authenticity, determined the nature and severity of the error, and evaluated its overall state of preservation. And after this exhaustive analysis, the coin was encapsulated in a protective holder with a grade and description that confirmed its status as a major rarity. And this third-party authentication is what gives buyers confidence when they're considering spending millions of dollars on a single coin, because they know that respected experts have verified every aspect of the piece. Let's also talk about the psychology of why collectors are willing to pay $3 million for a quarter. To non-collectors, this might seem absolutely insane, and they might ask questions like, why would anyone pay that much for a coin? Or isn't this just a waste of money? But what these questions miss is that serious coin collecting operates at the intersection of history, art, investment, and passion, and for collectors who have spent decades building world-class collections, the opportunity to acquire a truly unique piece that almost nobody else will ever have is worth extraordinary sums of money. And beyond the personal satisfaction, there's also the investment angle, because historically, the finest rare coins have appreciated in value over time, sometimes dramatically, which means that spending $3 million today might actually be a smart financial decision if the coin is worth $5 million or $10 million in 10 or 20 years. The market dynamics for coins like the 1980 Washington quarter are also influenced by generational wealth transfer. As older collectors age and their collections come to market, we're seeing more and more significant rarities being offered for sale, and at the same time, there's a new generation of wealthy collectors who are entering the hobby with substantial financial resources and a desire to own the best of the best. And when you have more buyers than available coins at the ultra-high end of the market, prices naturally escalate, which is exactly what we've seen with major error coins over the past decade. Another dimension of this story that I find absolutely fascinating is the detective work involved in authenticating and understanding major error coins. When a piece like the $3 million 1980 D quarter is examined by experts, they're not just looking at whether it's genuine or fake. They're also trying to understand exactly how the error occurred, what specific mechanical failure or sequence of events led to this particular coin being created, and this forensic analysis of minting errors contributes to our broader understanding of how coins are made and what can go wrong in the process, which is valuable knowledge for the entire numismatic community. If you're now motivated to start searching for valuable 1980 D quarters, here are some practical tips. First, focus on obtaining rolls or bags of unsearched quarters from banks, because these are most likely to contain coins that haven't been cherry-picked by other collectors. Second, set up a proper workspace with good lighting and magnification tools so you can examine coins thoroughly. Third, educate yourself on what different types of errors look like by studying images online and in reference books. And fourth, be patient and persistent, because finding truly valuable error coins is like looking for a needle in a haystack. But when you finally make that discovery, all the time and effort will be instantly worthwhile. The story of the $3 million 1980 D Washington quarter also highlights the importance of preservation in numismatics. This coin survived for over 40 years without being damaged, cleaned, or altered in ways that would have diminished its value. And this is a critical point for anyone who discovers what they think might be a valuable coin, because the natural instinct might be to clean it or polish it to make it look better. But in the coin collecting world, cleaning almost always destroys value, sometimes turning a coin worth thousands or millions into one that's worth only face value. So if you find something unusual, resist the urge to touch it excessively, don't use any cleaning products, and get it into a protective holder as quickly as possible. As we come to the end of this deep dive into the 1980 D Washington quarter worth $3 million, I want to leave you with this thought. Every day, millions of Americans handle quarters without giving them a second thought. They drop them in parking meters, use them in laundromats, give them as change in cash transactions, and toss them into jars to be forgotten. But among those millions of ordinary quarters, there are extraordinary examples hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered by someone who takes the time to look closely, and that someone could be you. The world of rare coins is full of incredible stories, stunning discoveries, and life-changing moments, and the two quarters we've discussed today, the 1971D worth $6.9 million and this 1980D worth $3 million, prove that amazing treasures can still be found, that ordinary-looking coins can harbor extraordinary value, and that anyone who's willing to educate themselves and search diligently has a chance at making a discovery that could change their life forever. So here's what I want you to do after watching this video. Go through your quarters today, examine them carefully, look for anything unusual or different, and remember that you're not just looking at pocket change, you're potentially holding pieces of history that could be worth millions of dollars. And even if you don't find one of these ultra-rare pieces, you'll learn so much about coins, history, and the fascinating world of numismatics that the time will be well spent. Remember, the collectors who paid $6.9 million and $3 million for these quarters didn't just wake up one day and decide to spend that kind of money. They spent years building their knowledge, developing their eye for quality and rarity, and positioning themselves financially to be able to acquire the best pieces when they came to market. And while most of us aren't in a position to spend millions on coins, we can develop that same knowledge and expertise, and we can be ready when we discover something special in our own change. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive into two of the most valuable Washington quarters ever discovered. If you found this information helpful and exciting, please hit that like button, subscribe to Error Coins Hub for more incredible coin stories and valuable information, and drop a comment below letting me know if you're going to start checking your quarters more carefully. I love hearing from viewers who are inspired to begin their own treasure hunting journey. And who knows, maybe the next person who discovers a multi-million-dollar quarter will be you. So get out there and start searching, because fortune favors the bold, and in the world of rare coins, incredible discoveries are still waiting to be made.